What's going on, guys, and welcome to today's video. And today, as you can see, we are with my 2021 Ram TRX. And now we already took it in and checked our alignment after all of the extracurricular activities that we've done with this thing. But I thought today it would be interesting to go in and see how the fluids look on this thing, how the front axle, the rear axle, and the transfer case fluids have held up to my 5,000 miles of use. And you're probably thinking, 5,000 miles, what are you talking about? That's nothing. It's still a brand new vehicle. But if you haven't ever been on the channel, you probably haven't seen what all we have been doing with this truck. Now, no, we haven't been abusing it. At least I don't think we've been abusing it, but we've been using this truck. We've went to the drag strip. We have rally crossed this thing. We have chased a Can-Am Maverick on a short course off-road track. And we've jumped the truck. And yeah, we've jumped the truck a little bit more. Now, like I said, I've got right about 5,000 miles on this thing, and it's probably got 30 to 40 drag strip passes down it. It probably has 30 to 40 jumps under its belt, and it's rallycrossed, and it's played out off-road, and it probably has 2,000+ miles of those 5,000 miles with the trailer, with the Camaro on it, going to different racetracks, going to different places with the Camaro. So, like I said, 2,000 miles of that have been heavy loaded, 6,000+ pounds worth of weight dragging behind this thing down the highway at 80+ miles an hour. So we already determined in this previous video that the frame, the suspension, all of that is strong as can be on this thing. I'll link the video up here. Now, we did an alignment before, and then we did alignment after doing all of that stuff, and absolutely nothing changed, which just kind of proves that these frames and suspensions are built to be used like we've currently used them. But what we haven't checked is the fluids on the truck. So that's what we're gonna do today. We're gonna go into the shop, get this thing up on the lift, and we're going to drain and refill front axle, rear axle, and transfer case with this thing and see, is the fluid crystal clear? Is it burn up and nasty from all of the abuse that I've been putting it through, or is it somewhere in between? So we're gonna go get this thing up on the lift in the shop and get some fluids drained and see what we've got. Now, I'm going to just snap my fingers and get there because I really can't afford to keep driving this thing on the road with the gas prices and the gas mileage. So we're just gonna go and end up at the shop. So I'll see you guys there. So now that we've got this thing up in the air, we need to get all of the skid plates down so we can get to the transfer case and the front axle. So we need to pull the transfer case skid plate, the front axle skid plate, and the very front suspension skid plate so we can access all of the drain plugs without making an absolute mess. And you're just gonna need a 16mm socket, and that will get you all of the bolts for all of the skid plates. And yeah, there's gonna be a bunch of bolts that you need to pull out, and all of the skid plates are kind of sandwiched on top of each other, but once you get those bolts out, you'll be able to drop the skid plates down and actually start draining some fluids. All right, guys, now that we've got all of those skid plates down, we are going to drain and fill the rear axle first here. Now, the drain plug is a little 1/4-inch drive thing here on the driver's side of the vehicle. And then the fill plug is obviously the 3/8 square plug here on the cover. Now, one thing I learned a long time ago was to always pull the fill plug before you pull the drain plug, because if something bad happens and you aren't able to get the fill plug pulled out, then you're gonna be screwed if you've drained all your oil out. So go ahead and break that fill plug loose first, and then we will be ready to pull that drain plug. Now, I am gonna be interested to see how cooked or not this fluid is, because like we talked about, this truck has seen some relatively heavy use. Once it starts draining, I'll try to grab you guys and throw you up here and see what this fluid looks like. So guys, here goes the first drain here at 5,000 miles. I mean, there's definitely a lot of metallic sheen to it. If you can see, all of this stuff is definitely a kind of shiny, metallic-y. Now, obviously, we don't have any big, huge chunks of metal falling out of this thing, but this is a new rear end braking, and it's gonna have a little bit of debris come out of it. Now, if we look, we do have a magnet on our fill plug, which has very little, and it does look like we have a magnet on the drain plug, which has a little bit more. Here, we'll kind of wipe it and see, yeah, we've got a decent amount. But again, it's all just really fine stuff, nothing big and nasty, but that fluid definitely could be changed. So obviously, I'm going to clean off our drain plug and fill plug magnets before they go back in. Now, once I've got all of that fluid drained out, I'm gonna be dumping in some Mopar 75-140 into this thing. Now, we in theory do not need limited slip additive dumped into this thing, because if we spin one tire, the other tire spins the other way. There are no limited slip clutches in a TRX axle, since it does have the electronic locking rear differential. It is just an open diff when the axle locker is not locked. Now, like I said, once all of that oil gets drained out, you can throw that drain plug back in, and we will start dumping some diff fluid in this thing. I have no idea how much it takes. I've got 3 bottles here. We will start dumping it in and see when it comes out. All right, so it looks like right about 2.5 quarts of fluid for this rear axle to finally get it filled up to the fill plug. So you'll definitely need to get 3 full quarts if you're doing this yourself. Next, we are going to jump up here to the front axle, and we have a drain plug and a fill plug, and they are a 8mm Allen key or Allen socket, whatever you've got there. And these are one of the things that you need to check the fluid level if you didn't when your truck was new. Almost every single one of these trucks that I PDI'd when they were brand new were about a 1/2 quart low on front axle fluid. So even if your truck's brand new, pull that fill plug and check how much fluid you've got in your truck, and definitely add if need be, if they're low. If it's not right up to the top, you need to add fluid. So again, we will pull the fill plug first, and then we can yank that drain plug and hopefully take a look at this fluid. Now, I'm expecting the front axle fluid to be considerably nicer looking than the rear axle fluid did, since it should be under a little less load. All right, guys, so as you can see, we still do have a little bit of metallic sheen to the oil. Nothing compared to what the rear axle was, but we do have a little bit, but it is considerably clearer than that rear axle. Now, this front axle calls for 75W85. Now, I am not terribly concerned with doing the exact fluid that it calls for. Again, 7585, but if you put 7590 or 75140, honestly, there is nothing that's going to go wrong. The truck does not have a Torsen front limited slip differential. This is truly just an open diff. So clean fluid is always going to be better than dirty fluid. So if you don't happen to have 7585, if you run 7590, 75140, again, it's going to be fine. There's nothing that's going to adversely happen. It's just going to be clean gear lube going into that axle. I happen to have the 7585 at my disposal, so I wanted to go ahead and run what the factory service manual calls for. Now, one of the kind of cool things about the room on the TRX is once you get that skid plate out of the way, you've got room to get a full-size gear lube bottle shoved up in there, and then you can go ahead and fill. So you don't need pumps and hoses and different things. You can just shove the whole bottle up there and start filling. All right, now this front axle only took about 1.5 quarts of fluid to actually get it full up to the fill plug. So when these came out of the factory being a 1/2 quart low, they were only running about a quart of fluid in these things. So when they only hold a quart and a half, that extra half quart is very, very important. So again, guys, even if you don't have miles on your truck, check that front axle fluid, top it off if needed. Or if you've got some mileage on it like mine, again, I'm only sitting at 5,000 miles, but I do have some heavy usage, and you guys are seeing that fluid color and condition. So we'll get this fill plug thrown back in, and then we will jump to the transfer case, and that will be basically all of our Driveline fluids we are going to be touching today. Now guys, last but not least, we've got the transfer case, and as you can see, we've got a 3/8 square plug for the drain, and if I can get you guys, there is another plug just a little bit higher, kind of behind the exhaust pipe here, for the fill plug. Pretty cool and convenient. You can just use that 3/8 ratchet to break both of those plugs loose. And again, always pull the fill plug first. Now, as I'm pulling these plugs, this is another item on the TRX that almost every single one was about a half quart low from the factory. So again, do yourself a favor, even if you don't have mileage, check that fluid, top it off if it's low. There's clutches in here that need to be lubricated. There's a chain, there's a lot going on. So make sure that is full, because 99% of them that I PDI'd at the dealership were about a half quart low, just like that front axle. So again, last but not least, we've got that transfer case fluid. And if you guys can see, that stuff is very, very clear. I see no signs of any little metallic stuff. Now, obviously, the drain pan is super dirty, but that fluid looks very, very crystal clear. But fluid changes are definitely cheap insurance on making sure everything stays nice and happy and isn't just swimming around with metal or break-in debris from the factory. So yes, little inconvenient on your new vehicle, but if you want it to last, you want everything to be as happy and as clean as it can be, it's definitely useful to go ahead and change it. Now, for the transfer case, it does take some kind of special fluid. It is Borg-warner transfer case fluid. Obviously it's from Mopar. I don't know if you can see that part number, but it is specific for 2016 and up Borg-warner transfer cases. And again, cool thing with the TRX, you've got just a absolute ton of room up here. You can take that bottle up above the exhaust pipe and put the whole bottle into the fill plug. All right, guys, that took right at 2.5 quarts of that transfer case fluid to get that thing finally all the way up to the top. Now, I don't know if you guys can see or not, but the new fluid is considerably lighter colored than what we drained out of there. What we drained out was kind of that darker yellow, and this brand new fresh fluid is very light yellow, super, super clear. So it definitely did have some wear and tear on that fluid. Even though we had no metallic shine or anything like that, the fluid color was definitely dark. Well guys, that kind of concludes all of the fluids that we were going to be messing with today. I need to throw all of these skid plates back on, and then we'll kind of get our final thoughts on, is it needed, is it not needed on the TRX for these early fluid changes. Well guys, what did you think? Were the fluids cleaner, dirtier than you thought they would be? Let me know down in the comment section what you thought. Now I've got my little cheat sheet here with all of the fluid amounts and kind of what we found, and I thought we'd kind of do a quick rundown over all the fluids just so we can kind of talk about it all in one spot. Now that rear axle fluid that we drained and filled, that was definitely our darkest fluid out of all of them. Now that took about 2.5 quarts of that 7590 or 75140. Either or is going to be completely fine in that rear axle. And again, we don't have limited slip clutches or anything like that, so straight axle fluid is going to be completely fine. Now, fluid condition on the rear end, like I said, that was our worst one that we found, and it was pretty dark. It was pretty metallic-y. Obviously no big chunks. Even on the magnet, we just had really fine dusting of metallic, and yeah, all of that's probably just from break-in, from the ring and pinion, from the bearings. All of that's very, very normal. But if this was after 5,000 miles, now albeit probably heavy use, but if this was after only 5,000 miles, it definitely would be cheap insurance to obviously drain and fill, since it is so easy to get to on these trucks. No special filling tools, no special draining tools, a drain plug and a fill plug, and you're done. Now on the front axle, which calls for 75W85, and again, 7590, 75140, they're all going to be fine. We don't have a Torsen limited slip front differential. It is just a open diff. So clean, clear fluid is going to be better than old dirty fluid. But with our 1.5 quart of capacity, we found just a little bit of metallic sheen to it. Nothing bad, nothing like the rear end, but again, cheap insurance to drain and fill. And on the TRX, it's pretty darn easy once you get all those skid plates down. But again, even if you don't have mileage, or even if you haven't driven them hard, absolutely check the fluid level in that front axle, because new vehicles, new TRXs, checking them in at the dealership, every single one of them was about a 1/2 quart low. And when we're only talking about a 1.5 quart of fluid to begin with, that's a pretty substantial amount. Now, all the trucks that I touched personally, I topped off and filled, but I can't speak about your personal trucks. So as we move to the middle of the vehicle, our transfer case. Now that fluid was super clear. We had no metallic sheen. We had nothing on the fill plug or drain plug. It was just nice, clean, clear fluid. Now comparing it to the new fluid that we dumped in, it definitely was a little darker yellow colored. So obviously it did have a little bit of wear and tear on the fluid, but we got those 2.5 quarts of new fluid dumped in, and you can at least rest assured knowing the clutches, the chain, everything is nice and lubricated as you continue to beat on or don't beat on your TRX. Now, like I said earlier when we were draining and filling, that transfer case is another thing on all of these TRXs that I've found that were about a 1/2 quart low when they showed up to the dealership. Again, all the ones that I touched, I topped off when I was doing the PDI process, but again, I can't speak on your truck. And I almost wonder if all of these trucks that had transfer case overheating messages coming up on the dash had to have been due to the fact that they were somewhat low on fluid. And since these have clutches and variable slip rates on those clutches, you're definitely going to make some heat with that transfer case. So again, super cheap insurance. Just drain it, fill it, or at least top it off if you don't know if it's been done. I'll try to add down in the description some of the fluid types and definitely the transfer case, because it is a special Mopar Borg-warner transfer case fluid. I definitely wouldn't want to put anything else in there other than that exact part number, since it does have clutches and electronics. But the axles, again, put in your diff fluid of choice and it's gonna be happy. So guys, as always, thanks for coming along on another in the shop adventure, and hopefully, even if you don't own our TRX, this is kind of good information on your new or not new vehicles on keeping those fluids fresh and clean, and it'll hopefully keep your high performance vehicle on the road and happy a little bit longer. So guys, as always, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys next time.